Welcome to the show. We have a massive stack of research on the table today, and we are turning our attention to a subject that is often dismissed by cultural critics as, mere pop culture fluff. But when you actually strip away the merchandise and the hysteria and you look at the hard data, the logistics, and the sociological impact, you realize this is a fascinating case study in global business and psychology.
It absolutely is.
We are conducting an extensive examination of One Direction.
It's a massive topic. To simply call them a band almost undersells the scale of the operation we're looking at here.
I agree.
We're analyzing an entity that sold over 70 million records worldwide. They generated an estimated business empire worth over $1 billion.
$1 billion.
Statistically, they are sitting right up there in the pantheon with, the Beatles and the Backstreet Boys.
Exactly. And the premise of our analysis today is to look at the group not just as a musical act, though we will get into their artistry and the evolution of their sound, but as a case study. We're looking at the intersection of reality television mechanics, social media mobilization, and global marketing strategy. We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do.
We're going to look at their formation, that absolutely meteoric rise, the specific engineering of their sound, the dynamics of their hiatus, and the significant events leading up to the present day.
And we have to approach this with the benefit of hindsight. Looking back now allows us to see the complete arc, and unfortunately that includes the tragic passing of member Liam Payne in 2024.
Right.
And of course, the recent documentary projects that have surfaced, it really changes how we view the whole story.
It does. The mission statement for this analysis is to understand how 5 solo applicants, Niall Horan, Zayn Malik, Liam Payne, Harry Styles, and Louis Tomlinson, were engineered into a global phenomenon that rivaled Beatlemania.
It's a story of luck, strategy, and impeccable timing.
So where do we start?
Context is everything here. We have to remember the landscape of the music industry in 2010. Before One Direction's success, boy bands were largely considered off the radar.
Completely. After NSYNC went on hiatus in 2002 and the Backstreet Boys slowed down, there was this massive void.
A huge void. The model of the boy band, the matching outfits, the synchronized dancing, was considered dead.
It was seen as cheesy. It was the era of indie rock and solo pop stars. You had the rise of artists who played their own instruments or these singular vocal powerhouses.
Exactly. The idea of 5 guys standing in a line doing choreography felt like a relic of the late 90s.
It really did.
And that's why One Direction is so important. They're frequently cited as the first boy band to rise to superstardom, specifically through the mechanism of social media.
Not just traditional radio player TV.
Right. The Detroit News even called them the first megastar boy band of the social media era. And that distinction matters because it dictated how they operated, how they toured, and ultimately how they burned out.
So let's go back to the very beginning, section 1 of our analysis, the formation and the X Factor. This spans 2010 to 2011.
It all starts with the auditions.
It's important to remember that all 5 members originally auditioned as solo candidates for the 2010 series of the British singing competition, the X Factor.
And this is the first crucial point of failure that became a success. They failed to progress individually.
They all got cut.
At the boot camp stage of the competition, yeah. The judges decided that none of them were strong enough to make it through in the boys category on their own.
Which is just wild to think about now, isn't it? Considering the solo careers they eventually had. But at the time, they were just teenagers who weren't quite ready. They were raw.
Very raw. And Liam Payne had actually auditioned 2 years prior in 2008.
Yeah.
Simon Cowell had told him to come back when he was older. So for him, getting cut at boot camp again must have felt like the end of the road. It's a moment of total rejection.
For all of them. But then came the intervention. On July 23, 2010, they were called back.
Right. They were put together to form a 5-piece band, which allowed them to qualify for the groups category.
Now, for years, there were these conflicting narratives on who actually formed the band.
That's right. Simon Cowell, the creator of the show, famously claimed in 2013 that it took him 10 minutes to put them together.
He made it sound like a flash of lightning.
Exactly. He positioned himself as the sole architect, the genius behind the curtain. However, the historical record was corrected in 2022.
The unseen footage.
Yes. The X Factor released previously unseen footage that painted a very, very different picture.
I remember seeing that. It revealed that Nicole Scherzinger, who was a guest judge at the time, played this really significant methodical role.
She really did. You see her looking at the headshots, moving them around the table like puzzle pieces. She literally says, they're too cute to let go.
So it was her idea.
She was the one who suggested putting them together as an imaginary boy band. She saw the chemistry before they even met.
It completely corrects the record. The footage shows Niall Horan was chosen as the first member, then Styles, Tomlinson, Payne, and finally Zayn Malik.
But even once they were a group, they needed an identity. They needed a name.
And it wasn't a marketing exec who came up with it.
No, it was Harry Styles. He came up with One Direction.
Which is a great name from a branding perspective. It's short, it suggests focus, it abbreviates perfectly to 1D.
It fits on a t-shirt, and it suggests a unified front.
So their first performance as a group was at the Judges' Houses stage. They sang an acoustic version of Torn by Natalie Imbruglia.
That performance was the catalyst. We really need to look at why. Simon Cowell noted later that they looked like a gang of friends and were fearless.
That's a key observation.
It is. In previous boy band eras, the groups looked like employees. They looked like they were working.
Right. Very polished, very rehearsed.
One Direction, in that moment, didn't look like a manufactured product. They looked like a group of guys hanging out at a bonfire. That accessibility was their selling point from day one.
They went on to the live shows, and within the first 4 weeks, they were Cowell's final act remaining in the competition.
He was all in on them at that point.
But here's the thing. They did not win. They finished in 3rd place, behind Matt Cardle and Rebecca Ferguson.
And honestly, looking at the data of reality TV careers, losing was the best thing that could have happened to them.
You really think so?
We see this often. The winner is locked into a very specific, high-pressure contract immediately. They have to release the winner's single in time for Christmas.
The winner's curse, some people call it.
Exactly. By finishing 3rd, they avoided all of that. It allowed them to sign with Succo Records for a reported £2 million contract without the immediate weight of the crown.
But the momentum was already there. I mean, it was huge. Immediately after the final, their potential winner's song, a cover of Forever Young, leaked online.
And people went crazy for it. But here's the real indicator of what was to come.
The book deal.
The book deal. Before they even released a single piece of music, they released a licensed book, One Direction, Forever Young.
And it topped the bestseller lists.
Think about that. They were selling merchandise before they were selling music. That proved that the fan base, which had coalesced online during the live shows, was ready to spend money. They bought into the people before the product.
Which brings us to Section 2. The global breakthrough and the album Up All Night. This is 2011 to 2012.
The machine starts to move.
The debut single, What Makes You Beautiful, dropped in September 2011.
This song is a masterclass in pop production. We have to talk about the construction of it. It features a prominent guitar-based chorus and riff, but importantly, it opens with that cowbell.
It was distinct. You knew the song from the first second.
It cut through the radio clutter. It became the most pre-ordered Sony Music Entertainment single in history at that time, and of course reached #1 in the UK.
But domestic success is one thing. The UK has had plenty of boy bands that never crossed the Atlantic. You know, Westlife, take that.
The US is the real prize.
Always. The real challenge for British acts has always been the United States. So they signed with Columbia Records in North America in November 2011.
And the executives at Columbia, specifically co-chairman Steve Barnett, saw that void we mentioned earlier. He didn't just see a band, he saw a demographic gap. He said he thought there was a gap in the market they could seize and hold.
But they had to be smart about it.
Oh, very. They did not just dump the album on the U.S. market. They used a British invasion strategy.
And it worked perfectly. When Up All Night was released internationally, One Direction became the first UK group in history to have their debut album reach #1 on the U.S. Billboard 200.
The first ever.
Not even actually. The Beatles did that with their debut. This earned them a spot in the Guinness World Records.
It was a massive validation of their social media strategy. This is key. They were engaging with fans on Twitter constantly. They released these video diaries on YouTube where they just answered questions and acted goofy.
So by the time they arrived in the U.S. for a radio promotion spree and to open for Big Time Rush, the demand was already at a fever pitch.
Exactly. The fans felt like they knew them personally. It was a parasocial relationship on a scale we'd never seen before.
And you could see it in the crowds. They performed on the Today Show at Rockefeller Center, and an estimated 15,000 fans showed up.
That is not a normal crowd for a morning show.
No. They also secured a guest spot on the sitcom iCarly, which was huge for their demographic at the time.
We should probably look at the financials here to really understand the scale. By June 2012, so less than 2 years after forming, executives were predicting the band would represent a $100 million business empire by 2013.
100 million.
And in August 2012 alone, their record sales exceeded 8 million singles, 3 million albums, and 1 million DVDs. It was just a money printing machine.
There was a hiccup, though, a legal dispute.
Right.
A U.S. band, also named One Direction, filed a trademark lawsuit in 2012.
Yes, essentially a garage band in California. The U.S. band claimed they had been using the name since 2009. They wanted 3 times the profits the U.K. band had made.
So what happened?
The U.K. group prevailed, likely through a settlement. The U.S. band eventually changed its name to Uncharted Shores, and the juggernaut continued. It's a classic David versus Goliath story, but in this case, Goliath had much, much better lawyers.
And musically, what was the sound of that first album? It was described as PG pop rock.
Correct. It wasn't R&B, which had been the trend for boy bands previously. It drew from power pop. Songs like One Thing have these powerhouse guitar riffs.
It was very energetic.
It was wholesome, but it had energy. Critics noted it was full of easy, rock-inflected pop. It was safe for the teenage audience, but catchy enough that parents wouldn't immediately change the station. It bridged a gap.
Which leads us into Section 3, Take Me Home in Midnight Memories, the years 2012 to 2013. And this is where the pace just becomes relentless.
The pace here is something I want to stress. It's almost unbelievable. They released their sophomore album, Take Me Home, in November 2012.
1 year after their debut.
1 year. Take Me Home debuted atop the Billboard 200. This made them the first boy band in U.S. chart history to land 2 #1 albums in the same calendar year.
That is almost unheard of in the modern era.
It is. It's an incredible statistic. And the songwriting team behind this was heavy hitting. You had Sivan Katecha, Rami Yacoub, and Carl Falk.
The Max Martin protégés.
The absolute A-team of pop. They spent 6 months in Stockholm shaping melodies specifically around the members' voices. This wasn't off-the-rack songwriting. It was bespoke tailoring for their vocal tones.
So it was very engineered.
The result was an album that critics felt was a bit mechanical. It was engineered to be a hit, but sonically very consistent with the first one. It gave the fans more of what they loved.
They launched their 2013 World Tour, which was their first all-arena tour.
And it grossed $114 million.
While on tour, they were also doing heavy charity work. They released One Way or Another, Teenage Kicks, for comic relief.
That video was significant because they filmed parts of it in Ghana, visiting a children's hospital, and also at 10 Downing Street with the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron.
It solidified their image as the good lads.
Exactly. They weren't bad boys. They were philanthropists who also happened to be the biggest pop stars in the world.
Then came Midnight Memories in late 2013, and this felt like a shift.
It was a very distinct sonic shift. Midnight Memories was described as edgy and had a rockier tone.
It did sound different.
They started integrating 80s rock influences, even elements of dubstep in tracks like Little White Lies. This is where they started pushing back against the bubblegum label.
And the lyrics changed. We went from You Don't Know You're Beautiful to themes of heartbreak and, more adult situations.
They were growing up, and they wanted the music to reflect that. They were trying to bring their audience with them.
The lead single, Best Song Ever, broke the 24-hour Vivo record with 10.9 million views. But what I find most interesting about this era is the 1D day concept.
Oh, the live stream.
The 7-hour live stream.
The 7 hours, a 7-hour interactive YouTube live stream to promote the album. They had guests like Celine Dion and Robbie Williams. This highlighted their absolute reliance on direct-to-fan digital engagement.
They didn't need a TV network.
No, they didn't need a TV network to get them a special. They built their own broadcast. It showed the power shift from traditional media to digital media.
And it paid off. They became the first group to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200 with their first 3 albums. They were breaking records set by the Monkees in 1967.
But you have to look at the schedule. Album tour, album tour. By 2014, the cracks were starting to show simply due to physical and mental exhaustion.
That brings us to Section 4, the touring juggernaut and the album 4 in 2014. And they launched the Where We Are tour. This was an all-stadium tour.
The scale is just immense. It became the highest-grossing concert tour of 2014, pulling in $290 million.
$290 million.
It's the highest-grossing tour by a vocal group in history. We are talking about 3.4 million people attending these shows. Imagine the logistics of moving that show from city to city. It's a military operation.
And amidst all of this, they released 4 their fourth studio album.
In 4 years.
Again, debuting at #1. They're the only group to have their first 4 albums debut at #1 on the Billboard 200.
What's notable about 4 is the creative control. Member involvement in songwriting increased significantly. Liam Payne noted that the album was edgier and that the group wrote most of the songs.
This is where the sound really matured.
It did. Critics started comparing them to Fleetwood Mac and the Beach Boys. There was a retro vibe in songs like Fireproof. It wasn't just pop anymore, it was respecting the classics.
But as you mentioned, the exhaustion was real. Harry Styles would later reveal in interviews that he suggested a hiatus in late 2014.
He said he didn't want to exhaust the fan base, but I think it was also about self-preservation.
It had to be.
The album tour cycle is a meat grinder. They were putting out a record every single year during the holidays. That is an unsustainable pace for creativity and for mental health.
You're just living in hotels.
They were living in hotels, completely isolated from reality. It was a bubble.
And that pressure cooker eventually popped. Section 5. Zayn Malik's departure and Made in the AM in 2015. On March 25, 2015, during the On the Road Again tour, the announcement dropped.
Zayn was leaving.
This was the moment that shook the fandom to its core.
It was huge. The official statement was that he wanted to be a normal 22-year-old able to relax out of the spotlight.
Which, looking back, seems like a half-truth at best.
Right. Later, he cited unhappiness with the musical direction. He felt he couldn't put any input in. He wanted to make R&B, cooler music, and the band was moving toward folk rock. He felt creatively stifled.
And the group continued as a 4-piece. They didn't replace him.
That was a big decision.
And they dropped Drag Me Down by Surprise.
Which smashed records. It was a statement of intent. We are still here. It was aggressive. It was confident.
Then came Made in the AM, the 5th and final album. This record explored jazz fusion, Brit-pop, synth-pop. It was a very mature record.
Reviewers called it a long love letter to Directioners. But the writing was on the wall. In August 2015, they announced an extended hiatus starting in 2016.
An extended hiatus.
The classic phrasing. Their final televised performance was on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve on December 31st, 2015.
And that video for history.
That was the goodbye. It was a retrospective. It was them waving goodbye, literally and metaphorically. It used archival footage of the band growing up, from the X Factor stairs to the stadiums.
It felt like closure.
It was intended as closure for the fans and probably for them.
We cannot talk about One Direction without talking about the people who put them there.
Yes.
Section 6, Fandom and Cultural Impact. The Directioners.
This is one of the largest and most active communities the internet has ever seen. They were known for mobilization. They would form mobs at airports. They shut down Leicester Square for the This Is Us movie premiere.
But it went deeper than just screaming, didn't it?
Oh, much deeper. The creative output of the fans was staggering. Wattpad, the online writing platform, was dominated by them. A quarter of Wattpad's most popular authors wrote One Direction fan fiction.
And that's where the After series came from.
That's the most famous example. After by Anna Todd, it began as One Direction fan fiction on Wattpad, with the lead character based on Harry Styles, a sort of punk Harry.
And it became this massive publishing franchise and film series.
Exactly. It shows how the fandom became a content engine in itself. They weren't just consuming content, they were creating it on a professional level.
We also have to mention Larry Stylinson.
Yes, the persistent conspiracy theory that Louis Tomlinson and Harry Styles were in a secret romantic relationship, this was a massive subsection of the fandom.
And it had real-world consequences.
It absolutely did. It impacted the members' real-life friendships and made their public interactions scrutinized to an unbelievable degree. It shows the dark side of that intense parasocial relationship fans believing they know the truth better than the people involved.
But they also had positive power. We have to talk about Project No Control.
A fascinating case. The fans decided they wanted the song No Control, an album track sung primarily by Louis, to be a single, even though the label didn't.
So they just made it one.
They essentially did. They organized online, independently promoted it to radio stations worldwide, created their own artwork, they got it played on the radio, they demonstrated that they could bypass traditional record label strategies entirely. It was a coup by the consumers.
Incredible. Moving to Section 7, the hiatus and solo careers, covering 2016 to 2024. In January 2016, reports surfaced that the hiatus was actually a permanent split.
Representatives denied it at the time, of course, but the actions spoke louder than the words. By May 2017, all the remaining members had released solo singles.
And they were successful.
Very. In 2017, Styles, Haran, and Zayn Malik all achieved #1 solo albums in the US. They tied a record held by the Beatles for members of a group achieving that feat.
That showed that the talent was distributed. It wasn't just one star carrying the group.
Absolutely not. They were all capable artists in their own right.
In 2018, they folded their touring company. And for most people, that was the corporate sign that the band was effectively dissolved. The reflections on the split started to come out in interviews around this time.
Zayn was very blunt in 2023, saying they had all become sick of each other by 2015.
Which seems understandable given the pressure.
Completely. Louis Tomlinson, in interviews in 2023 and 2025, described the split as another loss. He mentioned the room felt cold during that final meeting. You get the sense that business decisions overrode friendships in that moment.
Louis also noted that Liam Payne would have been the one most eager to reunite.
He did, which brings us to the most difficult part of this timeline.
Section 8. The death of Liam Payne in recent events. On October 16, 2024, Liam Payne died after falling from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It was a shock to the world and, of course, to the band.
That terrible tragedy.
Malik, Styles, Tomlinson, and Haran released a joint statement paying tribute to him, and the chart impact was immediate. All 5 One Direction albums returned to the top 40 of the UK albums chart and the US Billboard 200.
It fundamentally changed the narrative. For years, the question was, when will they reunite? After October 2024, that question became moot.
Impossible.
The lost reunion became part of their tragic legacy. You can't have a full reunion anymore.
As of now, in 2026, we're seeing the aftermath of that. A new documentary series created by Netflix is in production.
And it's notable who is involved. It features Zayn Malik and Louis Tomlinson reuniting to discuss their careers and Payne's death.
But not Harry or Niall.
No, Neil Horan and Harry Styles are not expected to appear in this series. It suggests that even in grief and retrospect, the unit remains fragmented. Everyone is processing it differently.
Finally, Section 9. Artistry and Legacy. We've touched on this, but they really were an atypical boy band.
They didn't dance. That's the big one. They rarely wore matching outfits. They were heavily tattooed. They presented themselves as individuals who happened to be in a group.
And they were marketed with specific personas.
Right. Neil was the cute Irish one. Zayn, the quiet, mysterious one. Liam, the sensible one. Harry, the charming flirt. And Louis, the funny one. It allowed every fan to have a favorite without invalidating the group as a whole.
And their legacy seems pretty secure. Rolling Stone has called them one of the great rock bands of the 21st century.
That is a critical reevaluation that would have been laughable to critics in 2011. But looking back at the stadium rock sound of Midnight Memories and 4, the comparison holds water.
And Billboard named 4 the best boy band album of the last 30 years.
It's a testament to their growth as musicians and songwriters. They remain the most successful act in X Factor history and one of the best-selling musical acts of all time.
We've covered a decade and a half of history here, from reality TV rejects to a billion-dollar empire to a tragic loss and a complicated legacy.
It's a story about the speed of modern fame. They rose faster than any band before them because of the internet, and arguably that speed is what made the crash inevitable.
One Direction's digital footprint will likely last forever, even if the band never shares a stage again. It is a fascinating reflection on the 2010s. Now, here is a final thought for you to chew on. Considering the intensity of their schedule, album tour, and the constant surveillance of social media, was the implosion of the band inevitable? Or did the very tools that made them famous, Twitter, the constant connectivity, ultimately accelerate their burnout? Did the fans love them to death?
That is the billion-dollar question.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.